Hi there, this is Ron Hunter, and I'm going to introduce the new visible felt leadership observation capture tools that our colleagues in Peelport's IT have developed for us. First of all, what is visible felt leadership? What do we do when we're on a safety tour? A VFL tour is a record of your personal commitment to helping colleagues stay safe by visiting them regularly, positively influence behaviours while engaging them in a friendly dialogue. That's what VFL is for. What is it not for? The VFL approach and the forms themselves are not for capturing hazard reports or near misses, injuries, environmental incidents, security incidents or damage incidents. We capture all of those in the new Sphere system. The VFL forms are solely for capturing a record of our engagement and conversations with colleagues at the sharp end on our safety tours. Okay, so here is a copy of the old form, familiar to many I'm sure. These paper forms and the PDFs will be obsolete from the 1st of November, and then we'll move on to our new online capture system. Looks quite similar in some respects, but the form has been significantly improved to help us analyse behaviours and provide good feedback on what has been observed for terminal managers and port directors. Before we get started on the new system, I thought I'd take just a few minutes please just to remind us of why we have a visible felt leadership programme and why we do safety tours. And the reason is that 96%, according to many studies, of all injuries are caused by unsafe acts. So what do we mean by unsafe acts? Well, for example, if you observed a colleague in a MEWP and they were not wearing a harness or were not attached to the MEWP cage by a lanyard, then that would be an unsafe act. By law, we have to have a risk assessment for all of our significant hazards. If someone was working without a risk assessment on something fairly hazardous, then that would be an unsafe act. If they do have a risk assessment, but they're not following it, then that would be an unsafe act, because the risk assessment is designed to identify what is required to keep them safe. So if it's not followed to the letter, then it's unsafe. Someone working without a safe system of work or not following a safe operating procedure, someone working on electrical circuits without a permit and appropriate isolations in place, someone not wearing the correct PPE, someone working at height without fall protection, all of these would be examples of unsafe acts. So we want to get out, observe people working at the sharp end, and when we see an unsafe act, engage in positive dialogue to influence behaviour. Okay, well here's a quick summary of the technique that is very helpful to us in addressing unsafe acts. First thing to do is to stand back a little bit, watch the men working, and think about what you want to say when you break the ice and enter into a conversation. Of course, there are many examples of people working safely. They may have their risk assessment, they follow it to the letter, they have all their correct PPE on, they've thought very carefully about what could go wrong on the task, and they've accounted for just about any eventuality, and that's fantastic. That's what we want to see more and more often. So by all means, reinforce that fantastic behaviour by giving praise. But if we do see unsafe acts, then we want to strike up a conversation in a friendly fashion and discuss perhaps the consequences or potential consequences of the unsafe acts and how we might execute the task more safely. Having agreed with the employee or employees the better way to do the task, then we'll make sure that agreement is reached to do it safely in future. Often shaking hands as we part, and with in excess of 250 people trained in these techniques, we will gradually reduce the frequency that unsafe acts happen on the port estate until such times as they're very few and far between, and that will be reflected in our incident data. When we get back to the office then, we will record the findings anonymously in the Appeal Ports database. We never take people's names when we're out and about and talking to them for these purposes. That is something that we avoid. So we'll enter the behavioural observations in the database on return to the office. This is the link that will take you to the new online tool. You'll find it on the intranet. You'll find it in the launch communications. Very simple, stands for Visible Felt Leadership Tour. You just click on the link and it will take you to the online system. So when you click on the VFLT link, you will be taken here, which will be your own homepage. Your most recent tours will be displayed with the particular tour you carried out last at the very top of the table. Of course, the first time you log in, there'll be nothing on the table, and you'll want to go to the top of the menu and click on New Tour, and the form will appear. So it's a simple case of recording your observations on the form. First of all, I was involved in the tour and it's defaulted to me. The second observer, well, who was with me on the tour? On this occasion, I was touring with Peter Eason. There wasn't a third observer, so we'll leave that one blank, just Peter and myself on the tour. We went to Peter's own territory, so Mersey, Steel and Metals, and the area visited on this occasion was a shed. Here's the date of the tour, simple calendar, easy to change the date, and enter the duration of the tour. And then start to complete the form with the observations that you made during your tour, not unlike the old paper and PDF forms we had before. So to save time, I've prepared one already, very similar tour, it's number 73. I'll go back in, same parameters entered at the start, and I'm going to explain first of all what Peter and I saw during our tour, and then I can explain the selections above. So we saw two contractors working at height in a mute, and they both had harnesses on, but the harnesses were not tethered to the mute basket. So that's not good. That is not safe practice. You ought to be tethered on. We asked them to come down for a chat, which they did right away, and we introduced ourselves. On talking to the men, we discovered that they had their risk assessments with them. One man had it in his jacket pocket, and both men had signed on to it that morning, which is very good. They also had a method statement, and when we asked about their training, they produced a safety file from the van which had records of their MUP training. So really good to have that stuff present and correct. The supervisor saw us and she came over to find out if anything was wrong, and we said, no, this is really good to happen upon a working party and they've got all the safety documentation present and correct. Isn't that common? So we said that was really good, and they said they appreciated the feedback. So that's a case of positive reinforcement given. However, we did see a couple of unsafe acts. Neither man had their safety harness tethered within the mute cage. One man suggested because it was a short duration task at moderate height, it wasn't really a requirement, but to the credit of the supervisor, she didn't accept that. She knew, as we did, that when the basket is at height, everyone needs to be tethered on. And she pointed to the risk assessment and method statement, which both said that the harness needed a tether and for the tether to be attached. So on talking to the men further, they both recognised the importance of the risk assessment controls, and they admitted to knowing that the tether had been identified as being necessary. So naturally we then progressed to the agreements that we made. Both men apologised on this occasion, and they said they would always wear their harnesses with a tether in future, and also said they would keep an eye on one another if either should forget. The supervisor also said she would keep an eye on things and monitor compliance with that particular requirement. So very friendly conversation, We all shook hands on it, said thank you, and then the men went back to work suitably tethered and safe. Down here we've got a box to record whether or not the unsafe acts were knowingly unsafe. So we saw two unsafe acts, which were two men, neither with a tether, but both men knew it was a requirement of the risk assessment and method statement, and they had decided not to follow either. So both acts were knowingly unsafe. And later on, when we've collected lots of tours, we can analyse how many of our unsafe acts are intentional versus unintentional. So heading back up to the top, we can explain why these choices were made. It was a mechanical task that the men were performing from the basket. They were contractors. There was no particular reaction from the men as we approached, so that's not really relevant. And over here, there is something that's relevant. The lanyard was not in use. So we've clicked on lanyard, and that means that this option here, where all required PPE was worn appropriately, that isn't ticked because it wasn't the case. This box is ticked below. Here I flagged that the risk assessment and the method statement were not followed, and also we can be very confident that when the men were trained in May, they were told about the tethering requirement because it's standard practice for work at height, and so we can be confident in saying that they hadn't followed the training they'd been given also. Down here, the equipment wasn't used correctly, and there was no issue of traffic, vehicle or plant management, so we ticked this all safe or not applicable box because it wasn't applying in this case. It wasn't a lifting operation, so again, not applicable. One thing to point out is these first three options here are not changeable at this place because these three are driven by the boxes above. So take lifting operations for example. If you make a choice here, then it's reflected in this option here. So these three are driven by the choices above. So I'll put that back to all safe, and you'll see that tick is removed. And what it does is these three are provided in more detail in specific boxes above to help us analyse three of the common themes that we see in behavioural safety tours. And over here, if there's anything else that's relevant, we can identify it as being relevant to the safety tour. So these three are automatic and these three are manual choices. Okay, that's it. That's how you fill in a form. When you're done, click save and it goes back to your home page and your most recent tour will appear at the top. You'll find there is some validation included, so let's make a mistake. We'll choose, let's go back to lifting operations. You can't have an option of all safe and an unsafe observation together. So if I try to save that form now, it will flag an error, and there it is. For lifting operations, I can't have both boxes ticked. So I go back to the tour form and I correct it, fix my error, and there it is. In this case it was an all safe, and now I can save it and it will be a correct entry. So now that has been accepted and it will provide appropriate data for the heat map and the dashboards and the other tools that our IT colleagues have provided to us. Let's have a quick look at one or two of these tools. The heat map, I think many people will be familiar with the heat map. Here I'm going to pick again steel and metals. Then we've got October 2018 view report and we get the heat map. Now the reason that only Peter appears is simply that we don't have data for everyone in Peter's team. Once they start to enter their data, the heat map will be populated with the others who make up Peter's team. Okay, so let's go back to the home page again. There is also a geo map, and what this does, you can click in and identify where the tours have been conducted. So if there's any part of your port estate that is being neglected, you might want to have a particular focus in an area. This little map here for all of our ports helps us identify where the tours have been carried out. There's also a dashboard for presenting data back to management teams. Here is, let's have a specific month, and once again, let's pick on steel and metals. Okay, 2018 October, run the report, and we get a dashboard of findings. So this breaks down the data and helps us identify where the issues may arise based on all of the safety tour observations that have been made. Okay, that is basically the tutorial over. This data is lacking a little bit, but once our 250 observers start putting their forms into the system, we'll get very good data for generating heat maps, dashboards, etc. And there we have it. So thank you for your time. If you have any issues or questions, you can contact myself, Ron Hunter, or Michael Campbell, and we'll do our very best to sort you out. Thank you.